Okay, so I want to look at expressions, variable types, and assignments. So, just start off with sort of the idea, a little bit of math in Java, and the difference between an integer and a double. So anything with a decimal point, Java will recognize as a double. So in this first problem, 3.0 plus 8 times 2, that 3.0, the result is going to be a double because we have a double in the thing is 3.0, but the first operation is going to be the 8 times 2 because the multiplication has precedence over addition. So we're going to get 3.0 plus 16, and we might think that's just 19, but we actually want to pay attention. It's 19.0. It's a double. And again, if I were to use a calculator or my computer to do this, it's just going to give me 19, which is correct, and it's not correct because we want that 19.0. Similarly, in the next part, we're doing a division, and if I look at, what is 18 divided by 5? Well, mathematically, 18 divided by 5 is 3.6, but in Java, this is integer division, and so let me come back up here and put my equal sign in there, sorry. So when we do the 18 divided by 5, well, 5 goes into 18 3 times, and because we're dealing with integers here, it's just the quotient 3. It's not the actual whole thing when you divide it, it's just the quotient or just an integer. All right, whereas 18 divided by 5.0 will be a double, and that is going to actually equal what we think. It should be 3.6. Now, another thing to be careful of is what if I had, 15 divided by 5.0? So 15 divided by 5.0, the result has to be a double. Again, if I use my calculator to do it, I get 3. And so that's an integer, not a double. So we want to be careful. Really, I say when you first look at the problem and recognize, okay, the answer is going to be a double. Let me just come back up here and, this one is a little easier because when we just do 18 divided by 5, we get 3.6. This one, when we do 15 divided by 5, we get 3, but because it has to also be a double, we recognize that by saying 3.0. Okay, and then the weird one here is, a lot of times when we're doing computations or we're doing a loop or something, we'll run into something like this, 1 divided by 2, and again, it's integer division. And so when we think about the integer division aspect here, well, 2 goes into 1 0 times. So the quotient here is 0. 1 divided by 2 is 0, which is a very strange thing mathematically. It's not. 1 divided by 2 is 0.5, but again, integer division, you truncate off the decimals, so you just get 0. Whereas when you're looking here at a double, 1 divided by 2, this will be a double because of the 1.0, and you're going to get what you expect, 0.5. We'll do one more. This is remainder division or mod, 14 mod 3. So you divide 14 by 3. 3 goes into 14 4 times. Goes into 12 with the remainder of 2. Again, these are both integers. So our result will be an integer 2. And this is the remainder when you do that division. For practice, you could open Eclipse and do some print statements with these things in them and see how you would get it. It's a little harder than what we did in practice or in, Python using idle, because you could just type these into the shell. It's one of the nice things about the Python shell environment was you could just throw stuff in and try them. Little more tricky in Java. Okay, so that's just straight up one operation. Now if we have to look at a couple of operations in a row, the order of operations. So again, in everything I decide if it's going to be a double or an integer first. So this is all integers, and including this thing in the middle, 12 divided by 5 happens first. Let's see, so parentheses, order of operations, parentheses, multiplication and division, but they go from left to right. Oh, I won't try to write this out. I'll just tell you. Addition and subtraction, and again, from left to right. Oh, and I left out exponents. Parentheses, exponents, multiplication and division from left to right, addition and subtraction from left to right. So this is the first thing we would do here. And again, it's integer division. So what we would get is 14 minus, well, 5 goes into 12 twice, plus 1. And that's 12 plus 1 is 13. You go left to right for multiplication and division. This is how I usually ask a few of these problems on the test. So if you, well, if we're doing it on paper, it's good to show this work so that you can see, I can see if I go to grade it, what order you did them in. I'm not quite sure how I'll do those for the Canvas testing yet, so we'll figure that out. Okay, here again, I look at it, I decide, oh, that's gonna be a double. So we're gonna go left to right. It's gonna be -1, no, I'm sorry, we're not gonna go left to right. We go parentheses first. Which is -1.0. And then we have that divided by 5 plus 4 times 2. Now we have multiplication and division, and we're going to go from left to right. This is now double division, so we actually do the division, we get -0.2 plus, I can do this multiplication now, 8, and that's going to total out to 7.8. Hope this green is okay. I guess I could use black, but whatever. All right, next one. Modular division to start. 52 mod 8. So what's the remainder when 52 is divided by 8? And again, this is division, that's multiplication. We're going to go from left to right. So we're going to do this guy first. A lot of times people mistakenly do multiplication first because in the order of operations, if we use PEMDAS, for example, multiplication happens first, but it's actually, multiplication and division happen at the same time, but from left to right. So 8 goes into 52 6 times. It goes into 48 with the remainder of 4. And then 4 times 4 is 16. And again, it's an integer. We're not going to have a double there. Okay, great. Now we'll do some coding. So there's the math part dealing with mathematical expressions and the order of operations, really. And then we'll look at some variable types in this next problem. Use Java to find and print the area and perimeter of a rectangle with width 5 centimeters and length 8 centimeters. So I'm going to go over to Eclipse. Let's shrink this guy down a little bit. We don't want to forget what we did back in Python, which is sort of, the coding is sort of happening the last, in the middle of the problem. So just to remind you, everyone, we would first look at what is the problem. So we would analyze the problem. This problem is pretty straightforward. Finding the area and perimeter of a rectangle with a given length and width. And then we would look at the specifications or the specs, and that would be sort of here we have a given width and a given length. We want to give those variables names, and then what are the formulas for both area and perimeter, and give them names. And then 3 is the design. There's not a whole lot of design in this program because we have the length, we have the width, we just need to find the area, find the perimeter, and then print them. And then step 4 is actually where you implement. That's the actual coding. So it's good to sort of think these things through, even if we're not necessarily writing stuff down. Oh, and by the way, I meant to mention this. The stuff, so I'm working in Notebook right now. The stuff that I do in Notebook, this purple, everything we just did, that's stuff that I would encourage you to take notes on and copy over into your notes, because this is stuff that generally it's the paper and pencil work, okay? Or it's the work that I'm doing on the board, in a sense, if we were in class. if you just do the coding in this class, you're going to miss out on the actual logic and the stuff, the work that's actually happening prior to coding is generally more important. All right, step 5 is testing and debugging, if my pen will work. There it goes. Let's see, where test and debug. And then step 6 is to maintain and improve. And sort of, you could think of this as the sort of outline for coding in general. You know, somewhere in here, the specs and the design is our pseudocode or our algorithm. You know, this side is sort of what is the problem and how are we going to go about solving it. The other side is now let's tackle it in the code. And in a sense, the left-hand side doesn't, I mean, it's somewhat language dependent. For example, in the next quarter where we're dealing with the objects in Java as opposed to just doing some coding in Java, that'll become more important, which language or what, at least what type of language we're using. But in general, the ideas are language independent. This thing on the left, the analyze, the specs, and the design, those don't really depend on the language as much as the syntax of the language as the stuff on the right does, the implementation, the debugging, maintaining, and improving. Okay, so jumping over to Eclipse. So again, on the purple, stuff we're writing down. Over in here, stuff we're coding, and that's where I want you to try to code and follow along. And if you need to pause and do the code, whatever, but you need to do these practice codes. You can't just watch them. It's not going to help you. I mean, it helps a little bit, but it'll help a lot more if you actually do the coding. So we're in chapter 2, and I have these old things open, so I can just close them. Close. I'm down here in chapter 2 again. Remember, if you're on a Mac, you need to determine which package you're in. We haven't done any code yet here, so I'm going to go into my source thing and do a new class. And let's call it, I don't know, rectangle. Well, that sounds like an object. So let's actually call it, let's look back at what we're doing. Use Java to find and print the area and perimeter of a rectangle. Let's just call it rectangle, it's fine. It's public, and we want to go public static void main. And we're going to go finish here. Excuse me. Okay, and again, if you are on a Mac, you should have declared the package and given it a name and then put this in that package. And it would say what package we're in here. I'm going to put some comments in up here. My name, you're going to put your name. The date, whatever date you're coding is fine. To me, it's 6/28/2020. The class, and then it might help to sort of, so the analyze step, if you can describe what's happening in the problem right here in the comments, you've probably done the analyze step. Now, the harder the problem becomes, the more work to be done in analyze. This problem doesn't have a whole lot of work to be done in analyze because what is this problem doing? I want to find this program does what? Will literally just from the problem find and print the area and perimeter of a rectangle spelling. Let's see, did I misspell perimeter? The word perimeter. I think it's spelled right, perimeter. I'll check it later. Of a rectangle with width 5 centimeters. and length 8 centimeters. You know, we can leave that all there always, or we can close it with this little minus sign here in Eclipse, and it'll hide it all for us. And then we can just scroll over it. And it'll show us what's in there. Clever. Or we can just open it back up. And that uses 10 lines of code. Notice the numbers over here are telling us what line our code is on. So our class declaration is on line 12. Our public static void, the declaration of the main function, is on 14. You probably only use one function here because, you know, the whole idea of this problem is just to declare our variables, assign them, and then find the area, perimeter, and print them out. Okay, so, you know, back over here, I could go into the specs. We're going to use probably just the words length and width for length and width, area and perimeter for area and perimeter. Or we, you know, oftentimes with geometry, you can use the letters that represent the thing. So W, L, capital A, and capital P. And then in the specifications, we might put the formulas, you know, the area of a rectangle. Let's see what that pen does. Rainbow color. Okay, area is, no, it's not good. Is length times width. Perimeter, that's kind of fun. 2 lengths plus 2 widths. So those are our specifications for this problem. And, you know, we might be careful of the units that we're going to use. So the area, when you multiply centimeters times centimeters, that'll be in centimeters squared, whereas the perimeter will be in centimeters. That's going to be when we output our results. Okay, I'm going to ditch the notebook, and we'll go over to, excuse me, over to Eclipse. I might make myself a little smaller. I know, so there's a weird thing for you that you have my Eclipse, my video going, and ideally you have your Eclipse running at the same time. So I don't know how you're going to do that on your screen, but hopefully you can make it work. One way to do it is just to watch me, then pause, do it, play, pause, etc. Okay, so we're going to declare our variables. They'll both, you know, both our length and width are integers. So integer length, and we can declare it there and move on to declare the width, integer width, but I could also assign it right here, integer width equals 5. So usually if you know the value, so for example here, we know what the length and width both are. So we might say length equals 8, integer length equals 8, integer width equals 5. You know, we could make this problem more interesting by making the length 8.2, in which case the length would be a double. Not a big deal. We would just change that to double. Width could still be an integer, but when we declared our area and perimeter, we want to use doubles, not integers. Okay, but everything's an integer here, so that's fine. We could also just assume these are doubles. That's probably safer, right? Because then I could just go back in and change the length and the width if I wanted to. I'm going to leave this integers. Okay, and then we don't know our area and perimeter yet. So let's just declare them. Integer area, comma, I can do them both on the same line. Perimeter. Perimeter. That should be spelled right. And again, a semicolon after them. And now what I can't do is then declare them again. Integer area equals length times width. It's going to give me an error because what's that error message? It's going to say something like I've declared this multiple markers duplicate local variable area. So I've declared the variable twice, meaning I have 2 copies of the same variable not allowed. And because I don't really need the declaration again. I've already declared it up here. So area is length times width, perimeter, this would be in our specs, equals 2 lengths plus 2 times the width. Notice in this formula, just real quick, if I go back to Notebook, you know, I just had 2L plus 2W. If I type in 2 length here, it's going to give me an error because you have to have an operation between them. And this operation, in this case, is times. Another thing to look at your code and try to model it on mine is between all these operations, I have a space. So it's length, space, times, space, width. Or the area, space, equals space. You want to try to have good spacing by putting a space in between any two expressions. So 2 is an expression here, times is an operation, or an expression and an operation. Always want to separate things with that space. Okay, and then so we've assigned the length and the width. We've declared the area and the perimeter. We've then assigned using formulas for area and perimeter. And now we just need to print them out. So system.out print line the area is, so now I'm going to use string addition. So I'm going to put a space after the word is, space after the quote, plus area. And let's leave it like that for a second, and we'll talk about it. I'm going to run it. And to me, there's a couple of things wrong here. If you ever have the opportunity to use a complete sentence, you should. And that's my opinion, but the person who does something like this on a job interview and ends it with a period, and the person who doesn't, I am going to be more inclined to hire the person who has proper punctuation. So if we learn how to do that early, it's going to help our coding overall. It's going to help other people understand our code in our commenting, etc. So the way we fix that is we just go back to here. The area is, and now I'm going to add a period. So we're doing string addition here. The area is 40. Now it's not quite right because the area is actually 40 square centimeters. So I'm going to add that in there. And I'm going to spell it out because I don't want to have to deal with trying to print centimeters squared here. Run it again. The area, and then notice I need a space after 40 and before the word square. So there's another spot where it's the attention to detail that I'm going to generally be looking for is proper spacing, proper punctuation. Have you given attention to detail? The problem itself is not hard. The attention to detail also is not hard, but it's an important facet of what we do. So the area is 40 square centimeters. Yay. And then we could answer the second question, which is the perimeter is again, I need a space after the word is, and then I add in the perimeter. And I'm going to add in, so the perimeter is measured in centimeters without the square. And then I need a semicolon at the end. And maybe I'll make that a little bigger so you can see it from start to finish. Run it. Same problem, 26 centimeters. I need to put that space in there. Run it again. So sometimes it's nice to have someone else proof your work, meaning, check your output, see if it's what you think it should be or what you want it to be. Oftentimes, there's some practice here. It takes some work, and I don't really want to take off points for this kind of thing. I mean, I want us to learn it, so I'm hoping that you'll just catch on and have someone proof your work or have you proof it yourself to make sure that these two things are complete sentences and the spacing is right and everything looks nice. Okay, there it is. Now, the other thing that we could do is, we could have another line of output that talks about this rectangle has length 5 and width 8. So maybe there's another line of code before these that says, I don't know, a rectangle has width equal to, and now we'll add the width in here. And then we got to add the centimeters in after. And let's put a comma. We'll make it a print statement. And then we'll do a print line statement. And length in space plus length. And then plus, we need centimeters, space, centimeters, period. Hopefully that looks right. Has width, let's get rid of that equal sign. Has width 8 centimeters, and I want to put a space before the centimeters. Width 5 centimeters and length 8 centimeters. Let's try to run it again. Again, so notice I cleaned it up, got rid of that equal sign. Has width 5 centimeters and length. So now, to me, that space looks weird. So we don't really need those spaces. Now that I think about it, we'll take them out. Run it again. The rectangle has width 5 centimeters and length 8 centimeters. The area is 40 square centimeters. The perimeter is 26 centimeters. Perfect. That will end this video. And we'll move on to still looking at assignment and things, but we'll do it with respect to using loops. Maybe be a little more interesting.